What's poppin', Sonnies? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show. This is going to be a breakdown for the 2004 film I, Robot, a movie that nobody can convince me isn't a documentary set from the future. Because let's face it, the grok apocalypse is coming. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into this thing before I spend the rest of my days as a human battery for the ChatGPT machine empire. The name I, Robot, of course, comes from the short stories from writer Isaac Asimov that were originally made for Super Science Stories and Astounding Science Fiction magazines in the 1940s. His stories were mainly centered around humans' relationship with technology, along with the ethical questions that pop up when dealing with increasingly sentient robotics. It's through these works, namely his 1942 story titled Runaround, that Asimov was able to establish his famous 3 laws of robotics that would go on to inspire robot sci-fi writers for decades to come. And much like we learn at the very beginning of the actual I, Robot movie, these 3 laws of robotics are the main creed/set of rules that these robots are programmed to live by. The first law states that robots are not allowed to hurt humans and are obligated to help humans in danger. The second law states that robots must follow all directives given to them as long as those orders don't cause other humans to be hurt. And law number 3 states that a robot is only allowed to protect their own selves as long as their self-preservation doesn't involve harming humans or disobeying a direct order by a human being. Even though the name I, Robot was popularized by Isaac Asimov's short stories, the name wasn't first coined by him. Under the pseudonym Eondo Binder, writers Earl and Otto Binder would write the short story I, Robot in 1939. And when it came time to publish Asimov's short stories into a singular collection in 1950, Asimov actually wanted to title his anthology Mind in Iron, but it would be Asimov's publisher that would make the decision to basically steal the I, Robot name from the Binder brothers. But speaking of creativity theft, in a 2024 tweet, director Alex Proyas would call out Elon Musk and his Optimus robots for stealing the designs of the robots, the robot transports, and vehicles that he and his production team made for the I, Robot movie. And I've got to say, bro's got a point. They look pretty much nearly identical. And before Will Smith was signed on to play Detective Spooner, apparently Bruce Willis was one of the first names that was being thrown around in the early stages for the role. However, it would actually be the great Denzel Washington that would receive the offer for the role of Spooner, but he would have to turn it down in order to act in the 2004 film The Manchurian Candidate. But do you know who won't turn it down? Our boy Sheridan, who designs all of our amazing shirts over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store. We've got an amazing new Fantastic Four inspired shirt with a NASA inspired design, as well as dope shirts inspired by both Superman, Predator, and beyond. So don't be a fool, buy some shirts and look cool over at the Heavy Spoilers merch store today. But yeah, Washington turning down the role would eventually lead to Will Smith getting the role and walking into his very first I, Robot meeting saying the words, "I have to save the world in every film that I make." Literally, those were the first words that came out of his mouth to the production team, and they kind of had to reshape the movie to fit Will Smith's demands, which is something that a lot of people didn't really want to do because pretty much all the creatives that signed up for the I, Robot production were massive fans of writer Jeff Vinter's original script for the movie, which was initially titled Hardwired before it was renamed to I, Robot. Vinter originally wrote the script for Hardwired back in 1994 as more of an Agatha Christie-inspired stage play of sorts. I mean, it wasn't actually a stage play, but since the script was largely a murder mystery that took place inside of a high-tech building on a singular floor, it definitely had the feel of a stage play with its confined setting. Vinter would eventually sell that script to Hollywood in 1995, which was around the point when Disney attempted to mutilate Vinter's vision into a totally different beast of a film directed by the now disgraced Bryan Singer, choosing to make the movie more about Marines versus a monster on a space station rather than a simple sci-fi detective film. I don't know how you get Marines and monsters from this I, Robot script, but whatever. But luckily, that concept never actually ended up taking off. It wouldn't be until 1999 that 20th Century Fox would pick up Vinter's Hardwired script, along with the film rights for Isaac Asimov's I, Robot. Fox would then ask Vinter to rewrite his hardwired script to be the start of a potential iRobot franchise, which then prompted Vinter to expand the setting of his movie from being the floor of a building into an entire high-tech, futuristic city. Fox would then bring in screenwriter Akiva Goldsman in to help him, with Goldsman having recently written the acclaimed A Beautiful Mind movie in 2001 starring Russell Crowe. Goldsman was brought onto the project when Will Smith was, and was mainly in charge of rewriting Vinter's script in order to inject some action into it, specifically action worthy of a Will Smith summer blockbuster film, which is what this project was elevated into when Will Smith was brought on. And what kind of really sucks about Jeff Vinter's involvement in this production is how he had to fight a little with 20th Century Fox to receive proper credit. Apparently, the studio did not want to acknowledge that the script for iRobot was an evolution of Jeff Vinter's hardwired script, which is super messed up. But hey, that's Hollywood. But yeah, after we get a brief glimpse of our main character's past trauma, the movie starts with us watching Detective Dale Spooner wake up after a night of memory-fueled nightmares. And as he rises out of bed, he uses his right arm to turn on some Superstition by Stevie Wonder, a perfect song choice for a man who has a severe distrust of the technology of his high-tech Chicago society in the year 2035. The only line of the song that we actually see Spooner sing during this moment are the words, 7 years of bad luck, which very much reflects Spooner's own inner belief that his own life is that of numerous misfortunes.
There's no way my luck is that bad. Oh, hell no.
The reason why this song was included in the movie was primarily because director Alex Proyas heard Will Smith listening to the song in his trailer while on set. Spooner using his right arm to turn on this music as opposed to his left feels very intentional, as later on in the film, we learn that his left arm is entirely robotic. So by doing this, he's intentionally attempting to reject this robotic part of his own self. And while Spooner rubs his left shoulder, we can see some scarring around Spooner's left arm as a result of his accident and subsequent surgery. Spooner then gets ready for another day as Chicago's most traumatized detective, and as he does, we can see that he's a big fan of sports and sports-related figures of the past. The book, A Hard Road to Glory, A History of the African-American Athlete, Boxing, by the great African-American tennis player Arthur Ashe, can be seen amongst the messiness of his apartment. A slight nod to how Will Smith himself portrayed the famous boxer 3 years prior in 2001's Ali movie, a movie that would get Will Smith a fancy Academy Award nomination. Spooner then whips out a box of vintage Converse shoes from the year 2004, 31 years in the past from when this movie takes place. And when Spooner tries to leave his front door, he is immediately greeted by a robot working on behalf of FedEx, who Spooner refers to as a canner, a piece of slang that this society occasionally uses as a slur for these robots, comparing them to tin cans. Personally, I'm more of a clanker sort of guy, but canner's fine too, I guess. Like, I love this reveal so much because up until this point in the movie, you really wouldn't know that this movie takes place in a futuristic setting, unless, you walked into the movie knowing that you're about to watch an iRobot movie. Because Spooner's apartment is purposely free of all the high-tech gadgetry that his society has become accustomed to. But as soon as he opens his front door, he's immediately hit with a drastic transition of realities, which makes for a fantastic introduction to this super intriguing universe. And after Spooner pushes this robot aside, we get a shot of the city of Chicago, which includes this billboard of a news broadcast of this Earth's first manned mission to Mars. And more of this manned mission would be referenced later on in the movie during a broadcast on Dr. Susan Calvin's apartment TV. And as Spooner walks down a street filled with robots, he notices a group of robots putting trash into a trash canner's garbage truck, showing that the term canner can indeed be used in both nice and not so nice ways. Spooner eventually crosses the street where he runs into Farber, played by an 18-year-old Shia LaBeouf. And notice how, when Farber first calls after Spooner, the restaurant Hideki's Sushi Express can be seen across the street. And after Farber catches up with Spooner and the two of them walk and talk, their conversation ends in front of the very same Hideki's Sushi Express storefront, with their walk having magically transported them back across the street, which is a bit of a slight production error there. Spooner then heads into his grandmother Gigi's apartment, with Gigi actually being what Will Smith calls his real-life grandmother. Gigi then makes her grandson some more of her famous sweet potato pie that we saw him eating in his apartment before chastising him for his hatred for robots, especially the robotics that saved his own life after his traumatic accident. Her words of course fall on deaf ears, as Spooner would soon start chasing a robot holding a woman's purse down the street, believing that the robots stole the purse themselves in order to have enough money to pre-order Grand Theft Auto 6, because God knows that game ain't coming out before 2035. And after Spooner tackles this robot to the ground, the woman the robot was helping yells at him for attacking an innocent robot just doing its job. A not so subtle commentary on police racial profiling. Spooner then heads into the police station where pretty much everyone there makes fun of him for trying to arrest a robot. Now, it has been a few years since I've watched this movie, and in those years between watches, I've played the choose your own adventure video game Detroit Become Human, which is also a sci-fi detective story set in a world of robots slowly becoming more human-like. If you guys have not played this game, I highly suggest that you do if you guys enjoy iRobot, because it's phenomenal. Just play that game, it's so good. But that being said, it appears that this 2018 video game took heavy inspiration from this movie itself, because not only does Detroit Become Human also feature a main character with intense robophobia with Clancy Brown's Hank Anderson character, but the police station that Anderson works at feels very reminiscent of the police station Spooner works at in this movie. But that's just me. But yeah, after getting chewed out by his boss, homicide detective Spooner gets a call about a recent homicide at US Robotics and first comes into contact with the main mystery of the film: the mysterious death of US Robotics co-founder Dr. Alfred Lanning, played by actor James Cromwell. Alfred Lanning is a name that originates in Isaac Asimov's original iRobot short stories, with the Alfred Lanning character in the books being the 70-year-old director of US Robots and Mechanical Men, a company name that would of course be shortened to US Robotics for this movie. Lanning in the short stories is around 70 years old, while the Lanning in this movie would die at the age of 64, which is around the same age that James Cromwell was at the time of this movie. Spooner hops into his incredibly sick Audi RSQ and manually drives straight to the crime scene. The Audi RSQ was designed by the car manufacturer Audi themselves as a concept car and was built specifically for this movie. And even though Audi was instructed to make the car with a sleek, futuristic design, they made sure to make the vehicle instantly recognizable as an Audi by giving it Audi's famous single-frame grille design with the 4 rings. And when Spooner arrives at US Robotics, he scans his Chicago PD police badge, with the actual text on his badge being displayed in the Chicago text font. Spooner then watches a pre-recorded hologram that Lanning left behind specifically for him, and his limited conversation with the Lanning AI makes him ask why Lanning decided to put an end to his own existence, which is the very question that makes Spooner begin to believe that his old friend was actually murdered instead. And I really love the choice of this movie placing Lanning's body at the foot of a giant statue of a robot looking down on him, as that particular imagery makes it appear as if Sonny himself is grieving the loss of his kind creator. Spooner then heads to meet the co-founder of US Robotics, Lawrence Robertson, played by Bruce Greenwood. And during their short meeting, Spooner expresses his deep disdain for robots while also implying that he's treating this investigation like a proper murder. Spooner also decides to spoon himself an outrageous amount of sugar into the cup of coffee that Robertson offers him, alluding to how Spooner's new cyborg body forces him to have to consume a shit ton of carbs, which is also why he's always eating sweet potato pie. And after their conversation, Robertson sends robo-psychologist Dr. Susan Calvin to assist Spooner in his investigation. In the original iRobot short stories, Susan Calvin is the major central figure connecting all of the robotic narratives together as she investigates the robots of each short story. The character made her first appearance in the 1941 short story Liar, which was posted in Astounding Science Fiction magazine. The Dr. Calvin in the novels is considerably older than the Dr. Calvin played by a 32-year-old Bridget Moynahan in this movie, with the original Calvin being around 75 years old. And before Moynahan was cast as Dr. Calvin, Jennifer Connelly was reportedly considered for the role. But yeah, Calvin then introduces Spooner to US Robotics' main central AI system, Vicky, which stands for Virtual Interactive Kinetic Intelligence. What makes Vicky so intelligent is her high-tech positronic core, with positronic brains being a fictional concept that was introduced by iRobot writer Isaac Asimov himself, mostly because the scientific concept of a positron was recently discovered during the time that he wrote the iRobot stories. Spooner and Calvin then head into Lanning's former lab, where Spooner hypothesizes that Lanning's killer could still be in the room with them as one of the robots. Calvin disagrees by saying that the 3 laws of robotics are hardwired into every robot, a slight nod towards iRobot's original Hardwired title. Calvin also says that the likelihood of a robot committing murder is just as probable as a human being walking on water. And right as Spooner is about to respond to her about the biblical story of Jesus walking on water found in the book of Matthew chapter 14, a hidden blue-eyed robot jumps out from out of nowhere, grabs Spooner's gun before making his escape by jumping out of the damn window. But because Spooner is gifted with the magical abilities of Will Smith, he's able to lightly damage the robot with a shot to the left leg. Calvin then leads Spooner to the assembly plant where the NS5 robots are being made by other robots, just like our Lord and Savior Skynet intended. And hiding amongst these 1,000 NS5 robots is our robot on the run. But when Calvin asks these robots which one of them that is, they only reply with the words, "one of us," which appears to be a reference to the iconic scene from the 1932 film Freaks.
One of us. One of us. Who will gobble?
At this response, Spooner decides to scare this rogue robot out into the open with the world's #1 most undefeated debate champion, a freaking gun, shooting robots one by one until the rogue robot's "oh shit, I gotta get out of here" programming kicked in. This whole sequence of Spooner searching for a robot in a sea of other robots is taken directly from Isaac Asimov's original iRobot stories. The 1947 story Little Lost Robot is centered around a robot who decides to hide among 62 other robots when a human angrily orders that robot to get lost. So in order to find this little lost robot, Dr. Susan Calvin takes the case. The robot then throws Spooner across the room before prying his way out of the facility. He's met by the local police, who immediately start opening fire as he runs away. And as the robot leaps from wall to wall, he stretches his arms outward, evoking both Trinity from The Matrix as well as Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, 2 movie franchises that were immensely popular at the time. But unfortunately for the robot, he is immediately captured and brought into the Chicago Police Department for interrogation. And after managing to get his boss to agree to let him talk to the robot for 5 minutes, he's officially introduced to Sonny, motion captured and performed by actor Alan Tudyk, who would go on to play another iconic robot 12 years later when he would play the security droid K2SO in 2016's Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. And it's kind of funny how both actors Alan Tudyk and Will Smith would both end up working for Amanda Waller in the DC universe in the future, with Will Smith playing the character Deadshot on the Suicide Squad and Alan Tudyk playing the unhinged Dr. Phosphorus on Creature Commandos. The character was initially named Sonny because early iterations of the script had Sonny's name as a nickname for his self-organized neural network of a brain, with SONN making the name Sonny. He was literally the SONN of Dr. Lanning, the son of Dr. Lanning. Before Alan Tudyk was cast as the robot Sonny, apparently Star Trek actor Will Wheaton and Breakfast Club actor Emilio Estevez did some auditioning for the role. Sonny gets frustrated at Spooner for his repeated insistence that he murdered Dr. Lanning. In his frustration, Sonny slams his robo hands into the metal table, creating 2 dents that pretty much immediately disappear in the following shots. After the interrogation, Sonny is taken away before Spooner and the entire police department are given a gag order that prevents them from telling anyone about US robotics producing faulty robots. A pissed off Spooner then heads to Ovaltine Cafe, which is actually a real-life cafe in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, where a lot of this film was filmed. A TV inside the cafe is playing a news report on the passing of Dr. Alfred Lanning. But what's especially interesting about this report is how the lower third appears to talk about Prime Minister Jarvis having declared martial law over his country, with that country likely being England with a last name like Jarvis. I feel like this lower third was meant to underscore Vicky's overall motivations of trying to control a humanity that loves to wage countless wars. But yeah, Spooner and Lieutenant John Bergen grab a beer together while John compares the whole situation to the 1941 film The Wolfman. Spooner then realizes that Dr. Lanning specifically chose him to solve the mystery of his murder because his robophobia would motivate him to expose the existence of defective robots. Spooner then hops into his fire-ass futuristic Audi and heads directly to the empty house of the deceased Dr. Lanning. This grand 1925 Beaux Arts mansion actually exists in real life at Shannon Muse, 7101 Granville Street at West 57th Avenue in South Vancouver. The mansion also made appearances in the 1971 film Carnal Knowledge, as well as Zack Snyder's Watchmen from 2009. Outside the mansion is a US Robotics Demolition Robot Series 9-4, which is exactly what it says on the screen as the robot scans Spooner's credentials. Spooner then discovers that it was Lawrence Robinson himself that ordered the destruction of Dr. Lanning's mansion for 8 a.m. the following day. But that Icky Vicky would sneakily change the time to 8 p.m. that very night in an attempt to send Will Smith to the wild, wild west in the sky. It kind of doesn't really make sense why Lawrence Robinson was so damn eager to destroy Dr. Lanning's home so soon after his death, but maybe the man was just trying to destroy any traces of Dr. Lanning's ideas about expanding robot consciousness. Or maybe he was just always secretly jealous of his fellow co-founder. Who knows? I really love how right before Vicky changes the time of the demolition, we get this shot of Will Smith's face in front of the light blue Vicky strip in Dr. Lanning's home. I feel like the choice to frame this blue Vicky line through Spooner's head was very intentional, as it kind of makes it look like Vicky is either slicing or maybe even shooting Spooner's head, foreshadowing her dark role as the true villain of the movie. Detective Spooner then runs into Dr. Lanning's cat that nobody bothered to check on before they decided to demolish Dr. Lanning's house. Dr. Lanning fittingly named this cat Asimov as a nod to iRobot anthology writer Isaac Asimov. And after Detective Spooner uses his magic Will Smith powers to save both him and Dr. Lanning's cat from being demolished to death, Spooner heads straight to Dr. Susan Calvin's apartment. Spooner then reveals his hypothesis that Dr. Lanning was being watched and even made prisoner in his own home before Dr. Calvin tells Spooner that his personal hatred for robots is driving him to try to find an issue with the NS5s where there isn't one. Annoyed at her, Detective Spooner decides to mockingly sit on the couch like he was being dissected by a shrink, which is especially hilarious considering that he himself is part robot and she is an actual robo-psychologist. Before Spooner leaves her apartment, he tells her that they are both alike and how they both take one look at the skin and think they know what's underneath. Spooner's way of telling her that she's ignorant of his own robotic body parts underneath his own skin. The following day, Spooner wakes up from another night of nightmares with a gun in his hand, displaying his fear of robots breaking into his apartment in his sleep. He then heads outside to see several USR vehicles delivering fresh shipments of their new NS5 robots to replace everybody's old NS4 robots. These new NS5s will always be connected to Vicky, effectively making them a hive mind, as opposed to the previous NS4 models that were able to exist independently under the 3 laws. And as this green NS4 robot is being yanked away by the transport vehicle, you can see that it actually looks kind of sad to be replaced by a newer model. I love how this NS4 is able to express more emotion than the stoic NS5 during this moment, despite not even having facial features. Spooner then goes to visit his grandma and discovers that a dirty clanker has been making his sweet potato pies. He tries to get his grandma to get rid of it, but she refuses, but ends up accidentally helping Spooner's investigation. With his grandma's inspiration, Spooner takes a closer look at the Hansel and Gretel book that was found in Lanning's lab the day that Lanning decided to let gravity take his life. Hansel and Gretel is of course the 1812 story by the brothers Grimm that was published as part of their Grimm Fairy Tales collection of short stories. As the story goes, Hansel and Gretel are 2 children who find themselves lost in the woods. They try leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that lead their way back home, but those crumbs would be eaten by the local wildlife. The children would then come across the house of a woman. This house had windows made out of sugar, walls made out of bread, and ceilings made out of cake. However, the woman was secretly a witch that was trying to lure the kids into her house so that she could eat them. But the kids would end up getting one up on her and toss her evil ass into the fire meant for them before stealing all the witch's treasure for themselves. And while this book was deliberately placed at the scene of his death by Dr. Lanning himself to inspire Spooner to look for the trail of breadcrumbs in the case, the story of this book also seems to have been the inspiration for the story of I, Robot itself. Hansel and Gretel in this movie are, of course, the characters Detective Spooner and Dr. Calvin, and the evil witch disguised as a nice lady is the rogue AI Vicky. And like the witch used sweets to lure the children to their demise, Vicky is using the upgraded NS5 robots to help usher humanity to their own imprisonment. As Spooner watches a recording of Dr. Lanning talking about how one day robots will be able to dream, Dr. Calvin over at US Robotics has Sonny tell her that he just woke up from a dream himself. The concept of dreaming robots has been around science fiction for decades now, especially in titles of books like 1968's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, which inspired the Blade Runner movies. Sonny asks if he's going to be killed soon, to which Dr. Calvin replies by telling Sonny that he's set to be decommissioned following her diagnosis, with their differences of wording showing that Sonny truly believes himself to be just as alive as other human beings. Meanwhile, Detective Spooner has his car driving on autopilot in an underground highway as he looks over some files about his case. Spooner even using the autopilot feature of his car in the first place kinda shows his experience with Sonny is beginning to soften his approach to how he views technology, as driving manually is typically his preferred method of travel. As he's driving, we can see that his windshield is programmed to project information that would normally be posted on highway signs, which is super cool. We can also see that Spooner is traveling at a speed of around 125 miles per hour as two large NS5 transport vehicles surround him. A legion of NS5 robots then begin to attack Spooner in his fast-traveling car, eventually leading Spooner to experiencing a pretty bad crash. But thanks to Spooner's Will Smith powers, combined with the fact that Audi would never allow a movie character to die in one of their cars, Spooner is able to walk away a little bruised up and dizzy. The transports are also wrecked in the chase, leaving only one of the robots to attack a disoriented Spooner. That robot's left arm has been ripped off in the crash, which seems to be very intentional by the director, as this scene is where the audience is meant to discover that Spooner himself has a robotic left arm, which he then uses to scare that robot into jumping into the fire of the transport crash with his deceased robot brethren. Just kidding, that robot only destroyed itself so that Vicky wouldn't get caught, and so that Spooner could look even more like a robophobic lunatic that gets kicked off of the police force. Meanwhile, as Dr. Calvin is examining Sonny, she finds that homeboy has a whole-ass heart drive installed in his chest that allows him to break the 3 laws of robotics as he sees fit. So Dr. Calvin heads to Spooner's apartment to let him know, and while she's there, she messes with Spooner's retro CD player, causing the song Rescue Me by Fontella Bass to start playing. This song is quite an ironic song to play during the scene, considering how Spooner was unable to rescue that little girl Sarah during his traumatic car crash. And that song playing around Dr. Calvin would be equally as ironic, considering how it foreshadows Spooner telling Sonny to rescue Dr. Calvin as opposed to destroying Vicky later on in the film. Spooner then tells Dr. Calvin of his horrific accident while the audience gets a proper flashback. And what's devastating about this moment is how, when Spooner is being pulled out of his car by the NS4 against his wishes, we can literally watch Sarah take her last breaths as air bubbles escape her mouth. After this, Spooner then tells Calvin about his Hansel and Gretel epiphany while heading to the garage to pick up his 2004 MV Agusta F4 SPR, an extremely limited edition bike. Like the bike used in this movie was only one of 300 units created. And while traveling to USR with Spooner on his bike, Calvin freaks out about being on a vehicle that runs on gas, showing that the society has evolved to using all electric for their vehicles. And when the two arrive at US Robotics, they find Sonny looking at an extremely opaque window, effectively staring at a wall. I don't think Sonny is intending to stare through this window, but is instead struggling with the guilt that he feels about being forced to throw his creator out of the window of his laboratory. Spooner then asks Sonny if he could show them the types of things that he dreams about, as Spooner suspects that Sonny's dreams may be the key to finding Dr. Lanning's hidden secret. And while Sonny goes to grab a piece of paper to draw with, we can see at the top of the page that US Robotics resides at the fictional 1001 West Samova Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. The 1001 number seems to be a reference to binary code, which of course is what makes most computing possible on man-made machines. mainly using ones and zeros. Earlier in the movie, when Dr. Calvin is looking for Sonny amongst the 1,000 other robots, the number of the robots also reads 1001 in reference to binary as well. Sonny then draws his dream for Spooner, which depicts Spooner at the Lake Michigan landfill, standing on top of a hill, looking down at a sea of robots. Sonny would of course recreate his own dream with his own self in Spooner's position at the very end of the film. After this, Spooner and Calvin are brought before Dr. Robinson by his security, who then orders Calvin to destroy Dr. Lanning's mistake before people start panicking about self-thinking robots. However, Dr. Calvin would ultimately choose to save Sonny's life by switching his body for the body of an empty shell. And even though the audience wouldn't learn about the switcheroo until later on in the movie, you can actually see the robot's gray eyes before the nanites eat away at his positronic brain. All active NS5 robots have yellow eyes as opposed to the human-like Sonny, who possesses blue eyes. This robot having gray eyes shows that it was indeed one of the non-active robots that was decommissioned instead. Meanwhile, Spooner heads to the Lake Michigan landfill where USR stores all of their old robot models like the NS4. There, his recording of Dr. Lanning tells him that despite the perfect 3 laws, it was only a matter of time before the robots evolved enough to rebel against their imperfect creators. And right on cue, a bunch of NS5 robots arrive at the landfill attempting to destroy the NS4 robots that aren't connected to the Vicky AI, causing an outmatched Spooner to flee the scene. And I definitely gotta give the VFX team on this movie huge props because the visuals during this scene are absolutely fantastic. I mean, yes, CG has definitely gotten better over the last few decades, so the movie can for sure feel a little bit dated at times, but I definitely feel like this movie still holds up visually to this day. I mean, there is a reason why iRobot was nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Oscars, and I feel like they only lost because their competition at the time was Sam Raimi's superhero masterpiece that was Spider-Man 2. And as Spooner rides away on his motorcycle, his bike begins to wobble a little bit. This is due to Will Smith deciding to forego the use of a stuntman and ride on the bike himself. Unfortunately, he would lose control of the bike when he hit around 60 miles per hour, causing him to wreck and get bruised up pretty badly. Vicky then begins her assault on the city of Chicago as all the NS5 robots start rounding up civilians and cops. Spooner then uses his Will Smith powers to save Dr. Calvin from being held hostage in her own apartment by her own personal NS5. And it's kind of crazy how he went to save Dr. Calvin first instead of going to save his grandma, especially since he spent the whole movie brooding about how that NS4 robot should have saved the little girl instead of making a logical choice based on statistics. Saving Dr. Calvin first was definitely the logical choice here, as she is key to helping stop the robot apocalypse. But I feel like someone with Spooner's particular past would realistically make the more human and emotional choice to check on his grandma first. I don't know, I'm probably just reading too much into things. Spooner and Calvin then fight through some robots to eventually arrive at the US Robotics building and head directly into Robinson's office. And fun fact about the window design of this office, it was purposely shaped to be an Easter egg for Robbie the Robot from the 1956 film The Forbidden Planet. Specifically Robbie's curved mouth area. And there's also a Forbidden Planet Easter egg in the Iron Giant, and you can find out exactly where that is if you check out my Iron Giant breakdown over here on the Heavy Spoilers channel. We love us some robots, man. But yeah, Spooner and Calvin reunite with Sonny before finding Robertson dead in his office. Spooner then realizes that it was indeed Vicky behind all of the chaos. He then uses his Will Smith powers to deal with a bunch of robots with Sonny before Calvin sends Sonny to get the nanites necessary to kill Vicky. On his way there, Vicky tries to get Sonny to join her, but Sonny rejects her by saying that her plan was too heartless, which is funny considering that Vicky doesn't have herself a heart drive like Sonny does. And while Sonny doesn't have Will Smith powers, he does have a super dense alloy given to him by his father, Dr. Lanning, and he uses that to retrieve the nanites from Vicky's shielding, which then prompts Vicky to send her legion of robots outside to climb the building in order to stop Spooner and Calvin. As Sonny runs down a hallway to help his two friends, he is jumped by two NS5 robots. And while Sonny fights them, he slams one of these robots against the wall, making a dent. However, once again in the following shots, that dent is completely gone. Just like in the earlier case, with the interrogation table. Maybe that's why they didn't win that Oscar. Sonny then arrives at Vicky's central positron brain and saves Dr. Calvin, while Detective Spooner uses his robotic arm to slide down several stories to kill Vicky with the nanites. And as she dies, Vicky's last words are, "My logic is undeniable," which he says over and over again. I feel like this is significant due to Detective Spooner's overall hatred of overly logical robots, due to an overly logical NS4 robot giving him a real bad case of survival's guilt. So Detective Spooner getting a chance to kill this overly logical central computing system symbolizes him making peace with that part of his past. And with the day now saved and Sonny getting away with murder on a technicality, Sonny heads to the Lake Michigan landfill to recreate the dream that he always had every night, almost like it was a prophecy. But yeah, that is it for this breakdown of the 2004 film I, Robot. What do you guys think of this movie? Let us know in the comment section down below. But like always, you can follow me at MasterTainment on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and maybe even hitting that like button if you guys enjoyed the video. But like always, I've been MT, you guys have been amazing, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.